This video was brought to you by Squarespace. Hey, real quick, I got a question. Do you need a website? If so, I've got good news for you. Whatever kind of website you need, whether you're selling stuff or advertising stuff or just looking to host stuff so people can come and look at the stuff, Squarespace can make it happen. Squarespace's intuitive builder makes everything a snap. I just grabbed a template that looked pretty good, I spruced things up to meet my needs and fit my style, and Arlo Recommends was born. Now creating content is just as easy. I can format and embed whatever I want, schedule it all to publish, and automatically generate social media posts, and I'm good to go. I'm a simple guy. After that, all I do is I sit back and I watch the analytics like they're a TV show or something. But if you need more than that, Squarespace also offers lots of powerful extensions as well. To try out Squarespace for yourself, head to squarespace.com for a free trial. Then when you're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/Arlo to save 10% off your first website or domain. And now for today's recommendation. Okay, I know I'm turning into a real Costco shill, but hear me out. Sweet Heat. This very well may be the singular best flavored nut snack I have ever had. I am severely hooked. Not launching into a huge tangent about why precisely I think it is so good is agonizing, so you just have to trust me on this. Kirkland Sweet Heat. Oh boy. Thanks again to Squarespace. Now, I've got a second question for you. Do you need the video to start? If so, I've got good news for you. Applesauce. When clear images of a Switch 2 Joy-Con first came to light, many eagle-eyed rumor mongers noticed what appeared to be an optical sensor on the side. Essentially the kind of sensor you may find on a computer mouse. And seeing as other Switch-like handheld PCs feature similar sensors on their detachable controllers, allowing players to use those controllers like mice, it stood to reason that the Switch 2 would feature similar functionality. It seemed likely that we would be able to scoot our Joy-Con 2 around on a flat surface to move a mouse cursor on screen. This idea did excite me. I mean, adding new functionality is always a good thing. You know, different games work well with different inputs, and people all have their own wide range of preferences. More controller options simply means more ways to play more games. So, yeah, I thought it was a cool idea. But I didn't give it too much thought until later when Nintendo officially revealed the Switch 2. They technically haven't confirmed mouse functionality explicitly, but some pretty revealing patents have popped up, and the trailer did show two Joy-Cons chasing each other around like actual mice, sliding smoothly along on fancy new straps which seem to be specially designed for just such an action. We don't have it in writing yet, but clearly this communicates that we're going to be able to use our Joy-Cons as mice if we feel so inclined. And now that this has essentially been confirmed, you know, now that I know for sure this is part of Nintendo's plan, I can't stop thinking about it. My brain is in overdrive just imagining all the possibilities. Suddenly, this seems like so much more than a convenient little option. No, like this might really be a game changer. There are just so many potential applications for something like this. First off, obviously, you've got games where you move a cursor freely around the screen. Naturally, the Wii delivered a lot of games that used cursors for menu selection and gameplay. The Wii U was compatible with Wiimotes and thus tried to continue this legacy, but that generation didn't last very long. So then the torch was taken up by the Switch and its gyro. Right now, a player can hold a regular Switch controller, yet still move a cursor around in games that support the feature. This idea had a ton of potential, but the gyro tech in these controllers is very flawed and prone to constant decalibrating drift. My mind, obviously, goes to Pikmin here. Playing the Wii U version of Pikmin 3 with the Wiimote and nunchuck, that is the best way to play Pikmin. It just is. It offers the most precise control, the most freedom. So moving to the deluxe version on Switch, the overall experience is better, the game is improved in a lot of little ways, and it's got a bunch of new content, but man, that cursor is not quite the same. I use the gyro cursor because it's better than just using a controller, but there's no denying I'm just not as good at the game anymore. Obviously, if the Switch 2 fixes the gyro weirdness, which it very likely will, this problem will basically be solved. Pikmin 3 Deluxe will be a lot easier to play. And yet, now I've got my eye on those mouse controls. Now I'm imagining precision that surpasses even that of a stable gyro sensor or a remote aimed at my TV. From the beginning, the Pikmin games have strived to deliver an experience that approaches the complexity of something one would play with a mouse and keyboard, yet is still playable on a controller. Really, even in the first game, you're controlling a little guy and a cursor at the same time. That's a lot of complexity boiled down to a rather simple experience. Quite genius, if you ask me, but I talked about all that plenty in my big fat review of Pikmin if you haven't seen it yet. Point is, each new Nintendo system with each new control option has enabled Nintendo to lean into Pikmin's natural complexity, allowing us to play these games with more and more precision. And the very idea of playing Pikmin on a Nintendo console with a mouse, it feels like the completion of an arc, you know? Pikmin has always been a little like playing a real-time strategy game, only without the mouse. But Pikmin with a mouse? I am a little frightened by the idea of trying to learn such a thing, you know, trying to rewire my brain to accept yet another new control scheme. Yet there is also a flutter in my heart. I am intrigued by this vision. Pikmin is of course the example that appeals to me personally, but the same will go for any game that has ever used a cursor for any reason. Whether controlling that cursor with a mouse will allow for more precise action or simply be a convenience, this could dramatically improve many old games without even touching the games themselves. And of course, this would simply allow for easier emulation of these games without digging into the code and reworking the controls. The gyro was never quite enough all by itself to act as an absolute replacement for pointer controls, but mouse functionality would be a lot more comfortable in a lot of cases, I think. And speaking of playing old games, what about games with touch functionality? Between the DS and 3DS, you've got a huge library of games that rely largely, if not entirely, on touch. Some of these games punched above their weight trying to emulate the mouse and keyboard experience. Metroid Prime Hunters certainly comes to mind. And if you want to talk about a game where you need to move a cursor precisely, Kid Icarus Uprising was preposterously ambitious for a handheld game, requiring Nintendo to bundle it with a stand so your hands didn't get too tired holding up your 3DS. Both of these games could technically be played with standard twin-stick controls if Nintendo wanted to make that happen, but you'd never get the same level of accuracy and speed. Mouse functionality, however, should mean that a Kid Icarus Uprising remaster is a lot more doable. Even more importantly though, consider the countless DS and 3DS games that rely heavily on touch controls for, like, everything. The touch and dual screen concepts opened the door for so many experiences that were very unique at the time. It was essentially like having a mouse and keyboard built right into a little handheld. Gameplay styles that previously worked best on PC were now available to all devs. So we got a slew of games featuring complex puzzles and lots of moving parts and multiple windows of information. The Wii U allowed us to emulate DS games, and using the gamepad worked well, but such a thing wasn't really doable on the Switch, was it? Will the Switch 2's mouse functionality open the door to DS and 3DS emulation once more? Well, you've still got the whole two-screen issue. Cramming both onto one screen could be slightly awkward, but maybe not so bad. I'm not holding my breath at this point, but if it's true that the system will allow us to cast to the TV and use the system itself as a second screen, that would certainly help. But then are you holding the system in one hand and using the mouse with the other? That doesn't sound super comfortable. And then you're looking up and down between the screens, but the mouse is contained entirely within just the bottom screen? If you put both screens just on the Switch, that might not be so bad considering the screen is bigger now, and if you're using mouse mode, you might already be sitting at a table anyway? I don't know. I guess there are still some kinks to work out there. But I smell the potential. When the Switch ditched the multiple screens and the forward-facing IR sensor and put the focus back on one single screen, thus returning to a more traditional console experience, I feared that we were leaving a lot of great games behind forever. Ports and remasters of these games have been great. In many cases, you can indeed tweak these old experiences to work with modern control schemes. But the idea of having a built-in solution that instantly enables seamless emulation and control of virtually every DS, 3DS, and Wii game, now and maybe forever? Well, I like that idea. I like it. If they can figure it out once, they've figured it out forever. As long as they don't eventually drop the mouse tech for some reason, but I don't really see why they would. Even beyond the Nintendo ecosystem, naturally, there are a whole lot of games out there that are certainly playable with a controller, but it's not ideal. Pretty much any game where you manipulate a lot of objects on screen or make a lot of selections. Mobile games certainly come to mind. I've finally fallen down the Balatro rabbit hole, I'm very sorry to say. And I played the Switch version for maybe an hour before caving and grabbing the mobile version instead. Obviously, this was largely because I could tell that this was going to be my new life, and so I needed to have it in my pocket at all times. But the point is, I just didn't want to play it on a TV. There's just too much to do. And you can use a controller, but it's infinitely faster and more intuitive to just touch. However, every once in a while, I do lament that I can't at least sometimes play on a nice big screen. Using a mouse would be a very happy medium in my eyes. And really, the same would go for any mouse-heavy PC games. Real-time strategy games are often compatible with controllers, but you won't catch me playing that way. I mean, it's why I don't play a lot of them, really. I like the idea, they're cool, but I need to play them with a mouse, and I just don't play games on my PC that much. Give me a built-in mouse on my Switch, though? Suddenly, a whole world has opened up. RPGs with a lot of menus and boxes to sift through. Adventure games with a lot of item manipulation. Puzzle games with a lot of moving parts. The DS and 3DS already enabled a lot of this, as we talked about, but the small screens and the lack of an actual cursor were two very big limitations. Ideally, you need a lot of space to work with. You need to be able to interact with anything within that space, and you need to be able to see your cursor at all times and hover over something without clicking it. DS and 3DS emulated the PC gaming experience to a degree, but this would be the whole shebang. Essentially, no limitations beyond a lack of an actual keyboard with like dozens of hotkeys or whatever. And if that's so important, you're probably just gonna hook one up or play on your PC anyway. And here's the biggest thing. I feel like this is probably the #1 most exciting application of this mouse idea, even if it won't affect me much personally. What is the #1 most popular video game genre? It's the shooter, in its myriad forms. And what is pretty much unanimously considered to be the best, i.e. the fastest and most accurate control scheme? Mouse and keyboard. I will admit, scooting around a sideways Joy-Con will probably not be a perfect replacement for an actual mouse. I tried mimicking the action with a regular Joy-Con, and you know, it actually worked pretty well. So I imagine that with an even thicker Joy-Con with a specially designed grip, it will work even better, but the form factor is still gonna require a bit of a compromise. However, if mouse functionality becomes popular or even standard, I would assume connecting actual mice to our Switches would be on the table in most cases. Whatever the case though, even if using a Joy-Con as a mouse isn't quite the same as using an honest-to-goodness pro gamer mouse with all the lights and the black plastic and the buttons and the negative 0.002 nanoseconds of latency or whatever, the very idea of using mouse controls to play shooters on Switch is still hugely exciting. For people wanting to play online shooters competitively, Nintendo platforms have not generally been the way to go. If you're not on PC, you're at least on one of those real consoles, you know, your Xboxes and PlayStations, the grown-up hardcore gamer ones. But now, the next Nintendo system might more or less be on par with PC as a system for playing shooters, at least as far as controls go? If true, and I'm not overreaching here, which I very well may be, that's huge. That's Nintendo genuinely offering something that the other consoles don't really have. You can indeed hook up a mouse and keyboard to your Xbox or PlayStation, but that's an extra step and developers have to enable the option to use them. Plenty of people are fine with extra steps and extra hardware, but I feel like having the functionality built right in without the need for any additional stuff makes it all so much more accessible. And if this is a big part of the system's identity, I think we'll see a lot of developers enabling the option. Kind of like how there are way more games on Switch that utilize motion aiming versus PlayStation games which rarely utilize it, despite featuring the same tech in the controllers. Sometimes you'll get motion aiming in the Switch version, but not the PlayStation version of the same game. And if it's true that mouse controls will help pull in some of the PC gaming crowd, then that's Nintendo once again playing to a huge market without exactly competing. Switch plus PC was already seen as a winning combo. Nearly every game on Earth, minus the few console-exclusive ones from Sony and Microsoft, which are growing more scarce every single year, with all the perks of playing on PC, mouse and keyboard controls, greater customizability, mod support, upgradable hardware, etc., plus all the Nintendo experiences you simply can't find anywhere else, plus any other smaller games you feel like playing handheld. It will be easier than ever to focus on PC and Nintendo and avoid those other consoles entirely. Since the Switch hit the scene, we've seen loads of similar handheld PCs, Valve's Steam Deck being the most popular. The market for this kind of thing has clearly been growing a lot, and for the PC crowd, these devices are starting to cut into Nintendo's share of the pie. Sure, Nintendo will never be able to top every one of these devices in terms of raw power, but the Switch 2 will still be plenty powerful, come with the natural stability and ease of use inherent to a device from a major industry player, and also built-in mouse support. Like the Switch 2 will be a great standalone console and a great supplemental one, but now it'll bridge that PC console gap like never before. It already appeals to so many people for so many reasons, and doubling down on the PC crowd, almost as an afterthought by simply putting little optical sensors in the Joy-Cons, it's just so smart. It certainly is possible that I'm reaching here. Maybe this isn't nearly as big of a deal as I'm making it out to be, but PC gaming is only growing. If you mostly play on consoles, it can be a little hard to see, but no, PC gaming is way bigger than a lot of people realize. A recent report claims that PC game sales are now outpacing sales on every other non-mobile platform combined. And yes, that includes Switch. PC gamers are now essentially the majority. They outnumber all of us Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony fans combined. And when a PC gamer is already less likely to have an Xbox or a PlayStation, but still decently likely to have a Switch, going after that market even harder is absolutely the right move. Even if mouse functionality ends up being a relatively small thing, everything has the potential to help tremendously when you're going after a market this massive. There's a reason the handheld PC market is growing so rapidly. Nintendo is doing what they can to ride that wave, and I think that's awesome. Dreaming is fun, but even if the potential is there, much of this will come down to the execution, and I do have questions. First, will this be something that can only be utilized if a game supports it, or could there be some sort of system-wide standard? Nintendo could certainly encourage devs to enable mouse functionality in their games, but it's probably unlikely that they'll require it. However, could the Switch 2 UI be designed in such a way that the user can pull up a cursor and move it around with mouse controls at any time? Maybe Nintendo will make it easy for developers to tie their in-game cursors to this system-wide one. Or even if not, maybe Nintendo will make it so that anything that can be done on the Switch 2's menus and even in-game menus can be done with this cursor. The Switch did have a touchscreen, but not every game actually utilized it. But imagine if Nintendo made it an imperative, at least for first-party games, to integrate this cursor into every experience in some way, even if just for menus and not necessarily gameplay itself. What if anytime you're looking at menus and selecting options and stuff like that, you've got the option to bring up this cursor? I think that would be cool. And it also gets me thinking about that C button again. Bringing up a system-wide cursor certainly seems like the sort of thing you'd want a convenient button for. Next question, similar question. If it's true that mouse controls open up new doors for many experiences on the system, shooter games perhaps most of all, is this something that Nintendo will actively utilize in their own games? I mean, we've barely touched on modern Nintendo games and the potential application there. It was less intuitive to build levels in Super Mario Maker 2 than it was in the original, unless you wanted to play handheld and use the touchscreen. But a mouse would allow for precision controls on your TV. There are loads of Nintendo games that would benefit from mouse controls. And of course, you've got your shooters. Splatoon is Nintendo's competitive shooter, and there are many players who swear that gyro aiming provides a level of speed and accuracy not otherwise possible. That may be arguable, but the benefits of mouse controls would be much harder to argue. Is Splatoon 4 enabling mouse support a given? Is this something that Nintendo is going to actively pursue in all of its projects? Or will it come down to the individual developers and games? Will it be like the Switch's touchscreen, or the IR sensor, or HD Rumble? An option if the devs want it, but not necessary. I do hate the idea of feeling frustrated that the hot new Nintendo game doesn't support mouse controls, even though everyone agrees that it should, and that they would make the game so much better. Even if a feature is cool, plenty of devs might not want to put in the extra work needed to utilize it well. I mean, work equals money, and if it's not necessary, then And final question, will this be more of a convenience thing, or will Nintendo really play with the idea? Is this more about accessibility, or is this a fun new gimmick that they're gonna design whole new experiences around? This is a cool idea, but it's still simple enough that it's hard for me to imagine Nintendo producing a whole bunch of mouse-heavy games. But on the other hand, it's clearly going to be part of the Switch 2's identity. They illustrated it right there in the reveal trailer. They're obviously gonna use it somehow. We all know how Nintendo loves their gimmicks. They love new hardware features that let them play with unique game ideas. It's vitamins for Nintendo. Gimmicks are to Nintendo as cookies are to Cookie Monster. And the Switch 2, it is boring in a sense. It's just a stronger Switch without any major new gimmicks. So far, mouse functionality really is like the most interesting new thing. And even that's not super weird. Could it be that Nintendo will dive headfirst into it simply because it's the best they've got? It's funny to suggest, but I don't know. I think I can kind of see it. They've got to do at least one weird Nintendo-y thing with the system, right? In the same way, the Switch had Labo, and it wasn't really that popular, but that didn't even matter. It was just something Nintendo had to do. They could have easily ditched the one awkward, poorly positioned IR sensor in the single Joy-Con, but no. They needed it for Labo. This stuff is in their blood. They have to do it, at least sometimes. And maybe mouse-controlled games will be their weird blue ocean experimental outlet this generation. It won't be long now before we learn precisely how mouse controls will be integrated into the Switch 2 experience. But if Nintendo plays their cards right, I don't know, I think they could have something pretty big on their hands. Time will also tell how Nintendo themselves might utilize this new feature, and how it might impact an entire generation of their games. Though knowing Nintendo, the Switch 2 will probably launch with Mario Paint 2, and then no game will use mouse controls ever again.